TellyCast, the TV industry news review.
Hi, I'm Justin Crosby, and welcome to this week's TellyCast. On this week's show, I chat with Sumi Connock, Creative Director of Formats at BBC Studios, and Katie Bailiff, the new CEO of Women in Film and TV, the membership organisation for women working in media. And we welcome back Richard Middleton, editor of Television Business International, as he updates us on the latest senior TV executive moves in Movers and Shakers. It's all coming up on this week's TellyCast. Don't forget to sign up for our new weekly newsletter called TellyCast Plus. It's completely free. Just visit our website to sign up at telecast-podcast.com. And why not follow us and say hi on LinkedIn, Instagram, where we're telecast_TV, and Twitter. So this week, my first guests are Women in Film and TV's new CEO, Katie Bailiff, and Creative Director of Formats at BBC Studios, Sumi Connock. Welcome to the show, Katie and Sumi.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Hello.
Thanks for coming on. Katie, let's start with you. You've just started your new role as CEO of Women and Film in Television. Can you tell us a bit about your background?
I grew up in the northern seaside resort of Morecambe, went to the local comprehensive and didn't know anybody that worked in the media when I was growing up. All my friends' parents had proper jobs, I guess. They were farmers or fishermen, teachers and nurses. So it wasn't on my radar at all as an option, as a career option. But when I was 16, LWT came to film an episode of Poirot at the Art Deco Hotel, Midland Hotel in Morecambe, which overlooks the incredible bay there. And a props woman called at our house. She was trying to source a traditional boat for the set. And as my dad was the local boat builder, she'd been sort of sent in our direction. So he loaded the boat onto the trailer, I remember, and I went along for the ride. And I just remember arriving on the set. It was like a night shoot, and the Midland Hotel was beautifully lit with a combination of, I imagine, a massive rig and a huge full moon. And David Suchet was there in period costume, and there were women being sewn into 1920s kind of silk cocktail gowns. But what I really remember was the atmosphere, the kind of busy chat and the crackle of the walkie-talkies, and the kind of grip and the kit and the clattering and the makeup truck. I just remember that really fun. And then there was elaborate fruit platters, and I'd never seen anything like it. And I just think that very night I completely fell in love with the idea of working in film and TV. And I remember as we towed the boat home, my dad must have sort of clocked this kind of vacant look in my eyes. And he had this expenses envelope that they'd given him. And he kind of gave me a tenner and said, find something you love doing and try and get some bugger to pay you to do it. So I did. I went off to York, went to uni, did one of the very early film and TV courses, and then was kind of the northern AP, I guess, for a while in Leeds and Manchester and kind of Glasgow, Liverpool, working out of the north. And a director called Brian Hill came up to make a film for Modern Times called Saturday Night, BBC. And I guess we just sort of clicked immediately. And I think, looking back, he was from a working class background in Rochdale, and I think our terms of reference, our kind of humour, our shorthand for casting documentaries, it was perfectly aligned. And we just sort of hit it off. We made Drinking for England with the Simon Armitage, who is now the Poet Laureate. And I think that sort of cemented a long-term working relationship. And I moved to London and I joined Century Films. I was kind of made a partner at Century very early on in my career. And we went on to make Feltham Sings, which won a BAFTA. And I think that's when the indie really started to grow. And I've had sort of 25 years at Century as the partner and creative director. And I spent years in the heart of British institutions, really, prisons and rehabs and schools and hospitals, making documentaries about all sorts of different social issues. And occasionally it was glam. We went on tour with Robbie Williams. I remember for the cinema doc, Nobody Someday, but that was quite rare. And we travelled all over the world. And I don't know, it just became a kind of, I guess, a place that filmmakers really respected and wanted to come and make docs out of. And I think I was really lucky to work with some really, fantastic sort of new talent and talent that went on to be, commissioners and top directors and running their own indies. And I think those early relationships, if you kind of invest in people and you kind of back them and effectively track them through their careers, I think that kind of grows, those relationships. They're kind of long-standing relationships, and they're really important. But I really loved working with new directors. I loved the idea of blank sheet of paper and a kind of new person. And I worked a lot on those new talent schemes that run out of Channel 4, the First Cut, and the BBC First Time Directors Scheme. And kind of broke a lot of people, I guess, into television. And I think, TV is a fantastic industry, and it's an industry that affords us great experiences. And I kind of think we've got a duty to pass that on, to give people breaks, and particularly people from underrepresented groups. I think, it's how we get the best telly. I think that's proven now. So when I was approached about the CEO role at WFTV, I could see that this would be like a really new and exciting opportunity, a challenge for me personally, but also a chance to use all the stuff that I'd kind of learned over the last 20 years of programme making. And I kind of had a chance, if you like, to sort of level the playing field. So I jumped at it.
That's a very vivid portrayal of Morecambe, and my mind's back to the fruit platters and and David Suchet. That's fantastic.
Well, I know. Well, it's having another moment as well, because ITV's The Bay is filmed up there at the moment. And I think every Wednesday night I kind of sit down and go, oh, that's that alley, that's that bus stop, oh, that's one of my dad's boats on the bay. So it's sort of funny that it's actually, that's the second time in its history, I think, that it's been, been used as a location. Women
in Film and TV. Can you tell us a little bit about the organisation and what it's set up to achieve?
Yeah, so, I mean, in a nutshell, Women in Film and Television is an organisation, it's a membership organisation that exists to be the voice of women in the media. It's the leading organisation for women working in the media, and it's got a kind of membership made up of all different levels, from channel controllers to kind of, to researchers, assistant producers, technical people, lawyers, business, right across the sort of landscape of telly, really, we've got members from. And as a member, you get exclusive access to the weekly events and networking programme. And the events programme is really great. So we've got screenings with Q&As, and we do sort of topical panel discussions, masterclasses, upskilling, and member meetups. And it's a really sort of busy and diverse events programme. There's 4 a week, and it's really well attended, especially at the moment with them being online. And we also put on the legendary WFTV annual awards ceremony, hosted by Sandy Toxvig, which is a whole host of brilliant women, which unsurprisingly sort of sells out in 9 minutes, apparently. We're currently running a bursary scheme. So the organisation campaigns for women, and it runs kind of funded schemes to kind of, develop women throughout their careers. So we've currently got the Pat Llewellyn bursary scheme, which is 4 lots of 10k development money, which is to give women to develop a talent-led factual idea. So if you think you've discovered the next Stacey Dooley or Nadia Hussain, Louis Theroux, they just kind of, we want 250 words and a bit of filming on your phone to give it, give us the idea of your presenter, and then you've got the chance to win one of these bursaries. And there's a great kind of set of industry people that back WFTV, and on that particular committee, there's Jane Root from Utopia, there's Kate Townsend from Netflix, Pat Young, and they'll kind of help you shape your idea and put it in front of the people that you need to get the idea over the line. What else can I tell you? The mentoring scheme, which is, we run this fantastic mentoring scheme, which is a programme designed for women looking to take a kind of significant step in their career. So there's 4 mid-career mentoring schemes run out of England, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. And Tracy Forsyth is the mentoring director, who I know you have on the show. Last year there's creative, craft, technical and business roles. And the next one starts in March, and we'll be giving 40 mid-career women the support to really, I guess, make the next step up in their chosen careers.
Very good. Well, we'll include a link in the episode description to the bursary. But just looking at women in film and TV as an organisation, what are the key issues for women in the TV industry and film that the organisation is looking to tackle?
Well, it's broad, isn't it? But I guess in a nutshell, equality and parity. It's the chance to be given the same opportunities as men, frankly, right across the industry. All genres, on-screen, off-screen roles. I guess that's it, really. Simple.
The pandemic has obviously changed many things in the TV industry, the way that we're working right now. And, I talk to guests every week about how it's affecting their business, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. In terms of the issues that women in film and TV is looking to tackle, are there any that have been more exacerbated by the pandemic?
Well, we did a survey before my time at WFTV back in March. The results were pretty shocking. Over 90% of the members lost their income. So 39% of women lost their jobs completely. 31% had their current work cancelled. And, the other percentage had their projects paused. And kind of, I guess, the overall picture, if, only 14% of British films are directed by women, but they make up 50% of film school graduates. So, what's sort of happening along the wayside. And in television, the stats are a bit better. They're 25% of British TV programmes are directed by women. If they are not having any work, if COVID has impacted women like our members, I think the picture's a little bit better now. And they're only making, 14% or 25% in the first place, then that's, it's pretty obvious that the impact is very, significant going forward. And it's the freelancers that have been hit. And I think a lot of women work in freelance ways. That 2/3 of freelancers have been left with no financial support. So WFTV launched its Forgotten Freelancers campaign. It's sort of continuing to lobby the government on behalf of male and female freelancers who, frankly, have been left a bit high and dry by the government interventions.
I wonder if there's any international organisations that are similar.
The WFTV is an international organisation. WFTV is the I on the end for international, and most countries have, to a greater or lesser extent, a kind of a similar organisation, and they do all connect up at major conferences once in a while, and kind of share stats and figures and incentives, and and kind of try and come together, to kind of address the bigger picture. But I mean, just going back to the pandemic a bit, I talked about the people that aren't working, but I think then you've got the other end of the spectrum where women may be in, broadcaster roles or, staff jobs. They are working and they're working really hard. And they're also possibly homeschooling and possibly covering other people's jobs who've been furloughed. So, there's lots of women either worrying about money or kind of killing themselves. On a positive note, I think the pandemic, but it's sort of thrown everything up into the air, all the pieces, hasn't it, of television, how we work, where we work, who does what. And, telly women are proving themselves, as I always suspected, to be superhuman, versatile, resourceful, flexible. And, maybe we could look at it as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for all these pieces, when they land, just to land in a slightly different place, just to land so the film and TV foundations can be rebuilt, and hopefully, maybe the inclusion piece just sort of lands slap back in the middle of the new TV landscape. That would be exciting to me.
There's a term that Prime Minister of the UK has been using about levelling up. So let's hope that's one of the positive outcomes of the pandemic, that things can be a little bit more equitable when we come out of it. Sumi, coming to you. Welcome to the show. You're creative director of formats at BBC Studios. Can you take us through your role briefly and some of the shows you're responsible for?
Yeah, we'll do. First of all, I'm loving the fact that this is a totally northern show today.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to echo what Katie said about that fact that, I've made some of my best friendships through working in TV. We're so lucky to get paid for doing something that we love. And that whole idea of, doing as much as we can to help people coming into the industry from different backgrounds. Katie, I don't know if you know, but I've actually been a mentor this year for women in film and TV, and it's been so rewarding, such a pleasure to be a part of the scheme. So I just wanted to say thank you.
I wanted to say thank you. Yeah, I knew that. That's fantastic. And well, you can speak from the horse's mouth, Sumi.
Yeah, it's been really fun. I guess the only downside is I've not yet been able to meet her in person. We are planning to do that once lockdown gets lifted. But no, it's been absolutely brilliant.
You're amongst fantastic company. I mean, people, you guys, Danny Cohen is a mentor, Fiona Campbell at BBC Three is a mentor. All these people dotted around the industry, all these different, powerful roles are kind of coming forward and saying, like, what do you want me to do? Which is, fantastic.
So basically, my role fundamentally is all about working closely with all our creative partners, whether it's in-house or in the indie community, to essentially identify and take the best creative formats to the rest of the world in both the unscripted and the scripted space. So that would be brands like Dancing with the Stars, Weakest Link, Top Gear, Bake Off. On the scripted side, it'll be Dr. Foster, Life on Mars, Criminal Justice, The Office. So that's sort of the main part of my role, but also it's about keeping those brands fresh. We'll do creative exchanges year round. And also, obviously, in the past 12 months, it's been about keeping those big brands on air during really challenging times and working how best we can do it and sharing innovations, knowledge, experience, challenges, the highs and lows.
Are you seeing an increase in demand for those familiar big format names as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that broadcasters are definitely more risk averse. And the result of that is that there has been a shift towards increased commissions of those big familiar brands that have got strong track record, high recognition factor, and they know that they're going to deliver an audience. And I think the reason why there's been a shift towards those is, firstly, I think whilst it was a bit of a novelty at the beginning, the audience sort of quickly tired of anything that felt like it was filmed on Zoom. And with a big, familiar and well-loved brand, you just get that sense of normality. When everything else is a little bit up in the air, you sort of sit back and think, oh God, thank God Bake Off's back. There's a huge feel-good factor. And for that 1 hour or whatever, 3 hours if you're in France or Germany, then, you're in that tent and sort of everything's okay in the world. So I think part of it is that sort of sense of, everything's okay, a bit of normality. I'd say that with these big brands comes a huge amount of experience in terms of being able to deliver these shows on a global scale. They've been produced for, years and years. Naturally, broadcasters are concerned about just having the confidence in the local producer's ability to deliver if it's a new format. So naturally, you've got a bit more confidence and assurance in production capabilities for a big established brand compared with a newer format. And I think those big brands have been really quick to adapt and work out how they can deliver their shows in a COVID-friendly way, but not to the detriment of the format on screen. So, we saw I'm a Celebrity in the UK shooting in a castle in Wales. The Voice have got their virtual audience. On Dancing with the Stars in the US, we removed the audience completely, sort of packed it full of lighting and with all the training, that was all filmed remotely. So no one was going into contact with the couples. So I think that has been a big part of it as well, that sort of assurance of being able to deliver with those big brands. And I also think co-viewing is a big factor. People have been consuming a lot more content recently because they're basically not leaving the house in a lot of countries. So there's more time that's spent at home. And if you're sitting on your own in your room at work all day, I think there's a tendency to come together as a family at the end of the day. So that broad appeal of those sort of goes hand in hand with those big familiar brands. So, Masked Singer, obviously slightly newer in terms of global formats, but has got that cross-generational appeal. Same appeal as shows like Dancing with the Stars and The Voice. So you all kind of want to sit down together, have a little bit of joy, enjoy it together. And then finally, I think with the big brands, the other big area has been a a particular demand for game show. And there's kind of been a return for a number of big evergreen formats in that genre, like Millionaire, Weakest Link. I think our US, we relaunched Weakest Link in the US on NBC last September, and it got the highest rated premiere launch in 2 years. And I think obviously that beauty of the game show is that you can film it in volume. It can be a really quick turnaround from green light to screen, slightly easier to film in a COVID-friendly way, which all those are big ticks at a time when we know that broadcasters have got an urgent need to fill slots. Plus, you can take one of those big game shows, bring a great piece of casting to it. We put Jane Lynch on Weakest Link in the US, and it feels as fresh as it did 20 years ago. Plus, there's a whole audience who've just never even seen it first time around. So those sort of golden greats of game show, Millionaire, Family Feud, Match Game, all completely stand the test of time as much as they did first time around. And they're just a bit of fun, aren't they? Game show is fun, escapist, play along, not too much sort of purpose and seriousness about them.
Yeah, and quiz shows actually, and quizzes, Zoom quiz, was a really big feature of lockdown one. Actually, I seem to remember that everybody seemed to be doing a Zoom quiz. We don't seem to have many recently, but you're right. Those sort of familiar formats obviously seem to have captured the imagination again. Just a point that you made about changes and tweaks in formats when it comes to producing in COVID conditions. What's the process of changing a show? I mean, obviously, we're not talking about a fundamental change, but because obviously when you put a format together, you have a Bible and this is how you make it and you're not allowed to change it. But presumably, this is the first time that anybody's really needed to consider making quite significant changes to an established format. What's the process of changing it to work within COVID conditions?
Obviously, you've got the formats that are wholly owned by BBC Studios, and then you've got third-party formats. If it's a third-party format, then we will, consult with them. We'll talk with them. I think right from the beginning, when the pandemic, we started to see the spread of COVID, it was really interesting to watch it because we had about 10 different versions of Dancing with the Stars on air the first 6 months of last year. So that was sort of having to learn, adapt, share that knowledge as, week to week, basically. We were creating big Google Docs, gathering in all the information. So using our international production consultants, using our wholly owned production companies on the ground, just a lot of talking to each other, finding out who was doing what, sharing that information. People did it in different ways. There were different approaches. There was obviously different government restrictions depending on the different territories. So there was a lot to take on board, and there were different approaches. If I take dancing with an example, you'd have some countries where you completely bubble the couples. So they are completely separate and there's total social distancing and there's no audience in the studio. On Bake Off, in the UK, they totally bubbled that production. So everybody went on site and they filmed it over a shorter period of time, but nobody came in and out. Same as they would have done with Love Island when they did it in Vegas in the US. But other territories with Bake Off just did social distancing. There were screens, there were masks. It was a lot of flying by the seat of our pants, but sharing all the knowledge as much as we could and being really, really collaborative and really fast moving, because it was really important to keep those brands on air. I think for a lot of reasons. Obviously, there's the business reason, but I think when like I was saying earlier, when those big shows do come back, there is that sense of relief and that bit of normality, and that's what the audience want when everything else is a bit more unknown.
What are the newer formats that you've had success with recently, and what would you say the reason is for their appeal?
So I'd say on the unscripted side, one of our most recent hits is a show called the Stand-Up Sketch Show from the guys at Spirit Studios. So this week, their third season started in the UK, and we did a local version in Sweden for SVT that aired early this year. So this show is basically comedians are obviously limited in the moment in terms of being able to get out and about, do stand-up gigs and tours. So stand-up sketch show is a brilliant way to bring stand-up to the viewers without them having to leave their homes, and in a really unique way. I'm not sure you've seen it, but basically you have a selection of comics doing stand-up across the hour. But as they start their funny anecdote, we then got to a reconstruction of how that story played out. So using comedic actors, using the comedians. So it's a really fresh and different and most importantly funny way of doing stand-up, which did exist pre-COVID, but it has been able to be produced during COVID times and just tick that stand-up comedy box when people can't get out and about and see it in real life. So that's been a really nice new hit in the unscripted space. But our really big growth area has been in scripted formats. As a result of COVID, obviously, a lot of broadcasters moved their dramas up earlier in their schedule to fill the gaps. And in effect, that lengthened the gap for when they can get their brand new dramas on air. And the beauty, of course, with scripted formats is the turnaround time. And we all know how long it takes to get, you've got an original drama off the ground, but with a scripted format, it's already been through that long process of developing, writing, honing the characters and the story. The heart of all our dramas are sort of big, bold characters, stories that have got universal appeal, whether it's infidelity, a woman scorned in Dr. Foster, or a man accused of a crime he didn't commit in Criminal Justice. We've sort of got that track record of having worked with world-class writers and producers, and it already have gone through that filter. So you end up with a product that's got an incredible pedigree that can then be taken and localised at a pretty fast pace. So I think a scripted format can really help broadcasters fill some of their drama needs in a much shorter time frame. And the successes we've had in that area have been Dr. Foster. We've done France, India, Russia, Turkey, South Korea, where it was the highest rating cable drama of all time in South Korea. Pretty great when it's an adaptation, essentially. In Turkey, it was the channel's #1 show in the past 5 years. And then our other huge success in scripted formats is The Office. And just sort of going back to your question of universal appeal, we spend half of our lives at work or working, even if we're not actually physically at the office at the moment. And we've all come across a David Brent somewhere at work. And that sort of concept has travelled incredibly well. So we've done 11 territories of that to date. We did India most recently. And I think just sort of the nature of where we're at the moment, that desire to have a little bit of fun in our lives, I think we're going to see a growth in scripted comedic, comedy formats over the next 12 months. We're already doing local adaptations of Miranda in the US, This Country, and Ghosts. So yeah, that's been our biggest growth area recently. Obviously The Office in the UK was just 2 seasons. And when it went to the US, they did hundreds of episodes. And so with that, we now have 200 scripts, which makes it really, really attractive for adaptation for those territories that want to do huge volume, which is really important for quite a lot of customers, and especially those that, want to have that nice binge viewing factor on their platforms.
Being a sitcom, I mean, it's actually quite contained as well, isn't it? So again, there's a COVID-friendly element to it because it's a relatively small cast. Not many stories that take place outside the actual office itself.
Yeah, exactly. It's been it's very contained, and actually similarly with This Country, it's a small cast of characters. By nature of the title, you are out in the open air, and most scenes are 2-3 people within them, so it makes it a great one to be able to film when you've got restrictions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I didn't realise that it had been remade in so many territories, so congratulations on that. We've seen baking and ice dancing sparking huge format hits. How can you tell what pursuits, if you like, will resonate with people around the world? How can you tell that ice dancing is going to be just, so massive, and baking? How can you tell them what's next?
If we knew what's next, we'd all be very, very rich indeed.
Yeah.
I think the truth is, you can't possibly tell 100% what's going to work and what won't. And as a distributor, you obviously ask yourself the usual questions. Is it returnable? Is it talent dependent? Is it scalable? But ultimately, it's about whether you love the creative, whether it feels fresh and different. Can the producers deliver it well for the associated budget? And is the originating channel, going to look after it? But I think what we have found out in more recent times is that nothing is too niche now. Our two biggest formats, baking and ballroom, you'd never have predicted that. More recently, we've seen Lego Masters, Talpa have just done Marble Mania, or John de Mol's done Marble Mania in the Netherlands. And I think rather than a particular pursuit, it's about the feel-good factor. And feel-good factual entertainment is definitely stronger than ever. We saw it with Repair Shop, whose ratings went through the roof at the beginning of the pandemic in the UK. And we've seen that we've had the same success with shows like Sewing Bee. It got over 6 million when it aired on, I think it was Saturday night over Christmas. 6 million people watching sewing on a Saturday. Kind of makes you question what the world has come to. But you'd never have thought that. It's a brilliant show, but you just, nobody would ever have put their money on that. Pottery's doing great. Pottery Throwdown is doing incredibly well, and Bake Off in France has had its best ratings of all time last year, probably pandemic related. But I think it's really hard to tell, but it's that feel good factor that is resonating so well, and just having an open mind to nothing being too niche. We've seen glass blowing, flower arranging.
There was lots of talk about make, do and mend, I think, and return to nature, return to the suburbs, almost as city centres are not really going to have a great deal of appeal for offices anymore. How important is it for you to look at human behaviour and societal trends to anticipate what's going to work, what's going to be the next bake-off?
Yeah, that whole idea of that sort of escaping into the everyday has become a sort of common theme, hasn't it? Because we can't travel or go on any adventures, so people are definitely turning a bit closer to home. So definitely part of the development process is tapping into those societal trends and looking at what people are doing. And a lot of that is definitely closer to home than it has been in the past. We have got, there's a new format from Youngest Media, which is launching in Germany, with the working title of Filth. But that basically taps into the trend of clean influencers. Don't know if you're aware of that. So, people and all their different methods of cleaning, whether it's, what's the best new chemical product on the market, or can I get my silver clean by using bicarbonate of soda and tin foil, which actually does work very well, by the way. But essentially, it's a competitive cleaning show where you've got 4 cleaning obsessed strangers who are all using their favourite cleaning hacks to try and take home the cleaning crown when faced with some pretty disgusting cleaning challenges. That, I would say, is a reflection of, what we've been seeing on social media recently. And we've got another sort of more studio-based comedy entertainment format called Fact or Fake. And that taps more into the fake news phenomenon, but also, our ability to consume those really quick hit viral clips. And the basic premise of that show is that can you have a panel of 3 comedians who can spot the fakes from the facts when they're presented with a selection of viral videos. So it's just fun, quick hits. They get shown a video, they decide whether it's fact or fake, and then we bring someone into the studio to reveal whether it is true or false. So just fun, fast-paced visual comedy show that taps into another trend. So yeah, tapping into trends is definitely fuels creativity.
And one more question for you, Sumi. Showcase is coming up very shortly. Can you give us any clues as to the themes your newer formats will be tackling this year?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously we're having to have a fully virtual showcase this year. So it's all a little bit different, but we've got lots of exciting content being put onto the platform. Yeah, a couple of things we've got. We've all seen the rise of the guessing game recently. we've got a brand new format called This Is My House that takes that guessing game concept, but essentially sets it in the real world. It's been commissioned for primetime BBC One in the UK, and we're really excited about it because it just feels really unique and it's got brilliant play along for the audience. Plus, it's very funny. And essentially, the concept is one contestant, one house, one rule, just be yourself. And it has four people who are basically all declaring, this is my house, but only one of them is telling the truth. And the other three are actors who are doing their best to convince the viewers and a celebrity panel in the studio that the house and everything in it belongs to them. So it's just really fun play along, sort of challenges your prejudices and perceptions and sort of asks the simple question of, will the truth win? And also we're all used to looking, I mean, it's so fascinating when you're on Zooms and you can see everybody's background, and we all love snooping around people's houses. So that's one that's coming up. That's This Is My House. And just sort of going back to, we were talking about that rise in the appeal for the game show, and a brand new game show called The 1% Club from Magnum Media, which is slightly different in terms of the fact that it's not about what you learned at school or your ability to memorize facts. It's just all about how your brain works. So an 8-year-old would have as much chance as an 80-year-old of winning. So basically, you've got contestants in a studio who are all competing to win a place in the 1% club, which means that you are in the top 1% of the country, an elite group of people who can say that they're smarter than 99% of the population. So because the questions are all kind of like a bit more brain game types of questions, it means that everyone's on a level playing field, which means that anyone can play along. So as we said before, perfect co-viewing for the whole family. It's being hosted by Lee Mack in the UK. And I think history shows us that if you've got a simple and compelling game with a brilliantly funny and entertaining host, you can get a really winning combination. So we have got high hopes for that one as well.
Now it's time for Story of the Week, where my guests get to highlight the TV industry stories that have caught their eye over the past 7 days. Katie, what's your Story of the Week?
Well, I enjoyed the story last week of the Golden Globes nominating 3 women for Best Director for the first time in history. So it's a history-making story. So Emerald Fennell, Regina King and Chloe Zhao all received nominations for their films Promising Young Woman, One Night in Miami and Nomadland, respectively. And I guess it's the first time that the Globes have recognised more than one female nominee in that category in the same year, never mind 3. So prior to that, the woman most recently nominated was Ava DuVernay in 2014 for Selma. We had a little whoop around the WFTV office when that announcement was made.
Great. Well, that's great. And also, we've got Oscar nomination week, I think, this week. We get to find out what the shortlists are. So fingers crossed there as well. Sumi, what's your story of the week?
Well, I was really interested to see the attention that the Australian version of Married at First Sight is getting in the UK, because it has had a huge amount of chatter on social. Also, stories coming into the UK press, which is pretty unprecedented for an international adaptation of a format. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I think it's the first time that an international adaptation has come back into the UK and captured people's attentions in the same way. In terms of reasons why, I think it's quite interesting. Is it due to lockdown? Is it down to the fact it's all available on All 4 so they can binge watch it? Is it because we are more open to consuming content from other countries because Netflix and the streamers have made the world feel like a much smaller place? But I think what we can definitely conclude is that no one does strict reality like Australia does. They've got big hooks, big drama, really compelling viewing. And Australia in general have got, a brilliant track record in terms of ramping up existing formats, taking them to the next level. If you think about MasterChef, they did that back in the day. We saw it more recently with Lego Masters, which I think was instrumental in Fox taking it on in the US. So, yeah, I mean, it shows how imported formats and content can find an audience if the content is compelling enough. So that is my story.
And now it's time for my guests to nominate their hero of the week and who or what they're telling to get in the bin. Sumi, who's your hero of the week?
So my hero is not someone from the TV or media industry, but certainly one of the most watched pieces of content over the past few days, because my hero is Jackie Weaver from the Handforth Parish Council meeting. I mean, I loved the whole thing, but her no-nonsense approach and reaction to some extremely bad behaviour was just brilliant to watch. I think it it was like a sitcom. You literally couldn't write it. Julie's iPad, I think, was my favourite character of the whole thing. There was the back of Barry Burkill's head. I think it just sort of captivated the frustrations of lockdown, coping with the pressures of working from home, being on endless Teams and Zoom meetings. And I just thought she handled it brilliant. And the crazy part is she's not even part of Handforth Parish Council. She was actually brought in to provide advice and guidance and support because they'd had problems at their meetings. So, yes, she's my favourite. And also, it all happened 10 minutes away from my house. I'm hoping to bump into Jackie Weaver on my next trip.
And you're going to have to tell her that she has absolutely no authority at all.
I mean, absolutely none.
And for people who haven't seen this, maybe internationally it hasn't reached them yet, but I'm surprised if it hasn't. But this is a viral video of a parish council meeting via Zoom that went viral over the last few days. And it was, just a lovely slice of Little England Zoom lockdown. And it was almost like a beautifully scripted mini comedy. We'll put a link to that in the description as well. Katie, how about you? Who's your hero of the week?
Well, I love Jackie Weaver as well, and I think it's almost like she's going to become a sort of verb. I'm going to have to Jackie Weaver you there. I think that I've filmed in loads of council meetings over the years and board meetings at various institutions, and like the Jackie Weaver is much needed on many of those occasions, and I thought she was great. But the one that I chose is kind of an antidote to that, to the idea of, we're all trapped in houses on Zoom calls with kind of people and children and work all around us. And I really loved the story last week in the press that Gothenburg Film Festival had launched a competition to give a movie fan the opportunity to spend a week watching its offerings on an isolated lighthouse island. It's just complete. I think it was a moment I was having. I just thought, that is my heaven. So they picked a nurse, a Swedish nurse. She was the chosen one from 12,000 applicants to attend the festival on her own. And she's been there a week, and she is on the island, the remote island of Havenskar. And she says it's a dream. She's video detailing her experience. But she's just like in bed, looking out at the sea in a lighthouse, watching the Gothenburg Film Festival programme. Is it just me, or is that heaven?
I think that's fantastic. I mean, we're all in isolation, but that's sort of taking it to the extreme, isn't it? Back-to-back sort of film festival in that sort of location. Sounds fantastic. And what's going in your bin, Katie?
What's going in my bin? Okay, so this is quite personal to me. And I know that everybody has got their own particular blend of worries at the moment, but I've kind of juggled a career and two small kids over the last 10 years without too much mum working guilt. I kind of, my kids know that I love my job. They clap when they see my name on the telly. And generally, they happily accept that, I'm on a shoot generally means someone else will be putting them to bed. So in truth, I haven't really suffered any major kind of guilt thus far in my parenting journey. But I think lockdown 3 is a game changer. And I think if you ask anyone in telly or in any other demanding career who's currently trying to either look after little ones, homeschool and work full time, checking on wayward aging parents, how they feel, After almost a year of this shit show, I think they'll inevitably tell you they are surviving, but they are riddled with guilt, mum guilt, off the scale, guilt they're neglecting their kids or their jobs or their partners or their parents or all of the above. And I hadn't personally realised how exhausting kind of mum guilt can be. So if you'll grant me permission, Justin, I'd personally like to put mum guilt well and truly in the bin on behalf of everybody. But I just ask that someone else puts the bin out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's all agree with that and chuck that in the bin. Sumi, what's going in your bin?
going in my bin is a continuation of the Jackie Weaver theme, which is I'm putting Alid's iPad in the bin because there were elements of Michael Douglas in Falling Down going on there. I think it kind of took Zoom fatigue and the highs and lows of working from home to another level altogether. So yeah, it was not nice to watch. But I think on a serious note, what I would take from that is it is just, and I don't mean to preach to people, but it is just so important to get out every day if you can. Go for a walk, get some fresh air, do some of Tracy Forsyth's lovely meditation or yoga. I mean, do whatever it takes that you don't feel yourself getting to that level that you need to scream at the top of your voice at a poor innocent lady. But yeah, so for that reason, Alid's iPad is going in the bin.
Alid's iPad. Sumi, Katie, thank you so much for joining me this week. Really enjoyed having you on TellyCast. Hope we'll see each other in the flesh very soon. Good luck with Women in Film and TV, and good luck with BBC Showcase.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
It's been a while since we've caught up with TBI's editor Richard Middleton to discuss the latest senior TV industry executive moves in Movers and Shakers. Hi Richard, how's it going over there?
It's good, thank you, Justin. Lovely to be back. Yeah, we've got a few snow flurries outside, but inside the office at TBI Towers, it's all good. My home office, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And what have you been covering in TBI recently?
It was a very busy January last month. We had all of the NatP and real screen events online, obviously, so we were trying to cover as much of that as possible. We were also putting together a digital version of the magazine for London screening, so we've got loads of UK sort of focused stuff in that. So we've got lots of data, lots of features, not just obviously on the UK, but looking at sort of how the UK is working with the world, which is obviously an increasingly vital part of the business for UK-based companies, and lots of stuff coming up around London screenings. We've got TBI Talks with 3 sessions planned for that, just ahead of just before the London Screenings Week starts at the start of March, and yeah, this digital magazine as well. So busy times.
For those who don't know, London Screenings is a fairly recent addition to the TV industry calendar, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's a really interesting one, Justin. So it's kind of based off the fact that BBC Studios normally has a big event up in Liverpool called Showcase, and that attracts sort of 700, 800 buyers into the UK ordinarily. Obviously, this year is somewhat different, but it's developed over the last 3 or 4 years with quite canny London-based distributors, all 3 media internationals, ITV Studios, that type of company, thinking that they'll pick up a few of these buyers that are flying in for BBC Studios event and holding their own events. So we've had screenings. Last year we had lots of screenings, drinks, networking events, that type of thing down in London to catch some of those buyers. And it's really developed quite quickly. This year we've had the big distributors, the big London-based distributors. So we've got your Fremantles, your All 3 Media Internationals, your ITV Studios coming together, and Banijay obviously as well, Banijay Rights, all coming together to create a schedule, at least, let's put it like that, so that their events don't overlap. What will be interesting is how that develops next year and the next couple of years probably, to see if they sort of put that that relationship on making sure that their events don't overlap, if they put that relationship any deeper and perhaps launch some kind of joint event or something like that. It would be a very interesting development for the UK business, but also for the international and European business as well.
Going on to Movers and Shakers, which executive moves have caught your eye recently?
There's been some really interesting stuff. I mean, back in the last year, we saw some huge changes over at the US studios, and to be honest with you, some of it is still happening. A lot of it is because of this sort of wholesale shift in the way that the US studios and increasingly companies around the world are aligning their operations, which is essentially to bring together streaming operations and sort of legacy businesses such as linear networks and bring those teams together. So back in the last week, we had some big news out of NBC Universal. Susan Rovner, who's the Warner Bros. Exec who joined NBC Universal to become chairman of entertainment last year. She made a few appointments at the back end of last year, and basically underneath her there's now a whole gamut of people who are overseeing NBC Universal's commissioning essentially and its production. This is all to do with sort of merging TV and streaming divisions. So unfortunately, there have been layoffs. There's rumours, the latest sort of layoff number is around 50 people being cut. But we've had quite a few execs put in place as well. Back end of last year, we heard that Lisa Katz was becoming president of Scripted under Rovner's entertainment division. And we had Rod Acer and Jenny Groom heading up Unscripted. And now we've seen the team basically that's underneath her. So we've got people like Cara Delaverson and Alex Sepiol being named EVPs of drama series. We've got Jeff Mayerson, who's become EVP of comedy series. And we've got Michael Schlushen, who's become EVP of current series and co-productions. On the unscripted side, we've got execs like former CBS exec Shan Vong. She's become SVP of unscripted development. And Shelby Shaftel becomes SVP of unscripted programming. So there's a lot of SVPs, EVPs, that type of thing. But I think the underlying sort of shift here and thing to really sort of take note of, to be honest, is the fact that, this is more turbulence, more job cuts, unfortunately, as Mark Lazarus sort of revamps the entire operations over at NBCU. We're hearing that this is the last sort of major changes that we're going to see from NBCU at the moment. But what it means essentially is that if you're pitching to NBCU, and that content now is going to be, it's going to go across, it's going to have teams that work on Peacock, it's broadcast network NBC, and all of the cable nets that come underneath it. So Oxygen, USA, Sci-Fi, Bravo E, all of these divisions are going to work within a centralised division, and you've got a team now put in place that's going to oversee all of that business.
Okay, so it's basically a centralised content division, if you like, overseeing all of these channels and networks and the streaming service.
It's it's cost cutting, and I mean, last year we obviously had the pandemic, but the real the major shift was the fact that all of these studios transformed the way that they do business, and streaming is now central to every company's operations out there.
Do we know where those job cuts are? Is it mainly in LA?
I think mainly in LA, yeah. We've got, most of them out of LA, out of Hollywood. There are, I think there's admin, backroom staff that have been affected, but also people on the commissioning side, on the production side. It's essentially sort of streamlining. We're hearing this increasingly. We've had Netflix streamlining its team, but now we're getting, we've had streamlining over at the studios as well, and it's a reflection on the way that the business has changed and increasingly vertically integrated, essentially, where you don't need multiple teams to look after networks and streaming. You just have one team, and it commissions across the whole gamut. And we've seen that, we've seen that at BBC in the UK now as well.
And we've seen some changes over at Disney as well.
Yeah, the Mouse House has been busy. This is a fairly straightforward one, but Rob Mills, who's been with Disney for a long time, I think since 2003. So he was previously SVP of Alternative at ABC Entertainment, and again, it's a very similar story. So he's now been promoted, so he's going to lead the new production division at Walt Disney Television Alternative. So essentially what that means is he's going to be developing unscripted shows for ABC, but also its US-focused streamer Hulu. So again, it's all about this. There's this integration between what's happening on the linear side and what's happening on the OTT side.
And how about Canada? Now we're always talking about the US, and we're often talking about the UK. Canada is a territory that we haven't covered off in great detail so far on TellyCast. There's obviously been some big moves in the industry over there in terms of senior execs.
Yeah, there has. It's really interesting to sort of see how this, what we were seeing last year, this as I say, sort of streamlining at the studios it's spreading around the world. As I said, we had it over at the BBC. ITV's in the UK has changed the way it operates as well. This just past January, we've seen similar changes up at Bell Media in Canada. So last week we had 200 odd jobs going in across people on camera, people off camera. There were various senior execs going. Robin Johnston, director of original production, Factual and Reality, was reportedly among those departing. And again, it's to do with just this streamlining, basically focusing on on streaming, without wanting to repeat myself. And I mean, the interesting thing about Bell is they've got a new boss, Wade Oosterman, who was brought in last year to replace Randy Lennox. He kicked everything off at the start of the year with some fairly monumental changes. Long-standing execs, Mike Cosentino, who was the content chief there, SVP of Original Programming, Corey Coe departed. We saw Nancy McLean, who headed up she was VP of Bell Media Studios. She went. And this was all because Bell Media, it's got its own streamer called Crave TV, and it's looking to put more focus on that. And it's facing huge competition from Netflix and from some of the other streamers. Instead of focusing purely on networks, such as its CTV branded channels, and it's got relationships with sort of 30 specialist networks with partners such as Discovery and Comedy Central. It's looking to focus much more on Crave TV, that direct-to-consumer approach, and as a result, it's completely revolutionised the way it's working.
Those three stories there, they all tell a bigger story, a wider story, don't they, of the industry that I'm sure is going to be a trend we're going to be seeing more and more often, those sort of announcements coming out over the year. So, Richard, thank you so much for spending your time with us on Movers and Shakers again this month. All the best to you. Speak to you very soon.
Lovely to be on. Thanks, Justin.
Well, we've reached the end of another week's show. At the end of episode 45. It's amazing how quickly we've got to nearly a year of telecasts. Thanks for listening to this show and to all the previous shows so far. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to TellyCast and share it with friends and colleagues. And a quick reminder to sign up for our new free newsletter called TellyCast Plus. It's packed with interesting TV industry stories of the week you may have missed, exclusive insight and opinion, including the secret producer, our intrepid, anonymous exec reporting from the front line of TV production. It's all completely free. Just visit our website to sign up at telecast-podcast.com and follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn and Twitter. TellyCast was edited by Ian Chambers and recorded in Lockdown 3 in London. So, until next Thursday, as always, stay safe